Hi guys, Aka here. So, some time ago, I had the opportunity to have a sit down with Evony Academy. And, it was a pretty chill affair. We talked for a bit, talked about general stuff, talked about Evony stuff, and it was a good time. For anyone that doesn't know Evony Academy, here is a sampling, a taste, some hors d'oeuvres, if you will, of the kind of stuff you can see at Evony Academy.
Now, the last video, if you didn't watch it, was my recommendations for the best generals for a player that is free to play. And I saw three things mainly. One, I did not mention Queen Boudica as a free to play general. Number two, I didn't mention Martinus or Roland as a free to play general. And three, did not mention Minamoto as a free to play general. Now, the reason I didn't mention any of these generals is uh, most of them are just bad. And in the case of Queen Boudica, she's not bad, but she's not a good general for a free-to-play player. So in this video, I'm going to explain why if you're a free-to-play player, you should not use any of these generals.
Now, Evony Academy does a lot of work with comparing generals, and it's good work. But there's something that I always wasn't really clear about, and that's when he's comparing generals. To be more precise, when he's comparing general marches. So you have troops being led by certain generals, and he's comparing which one is better. That's something I wasn't really clear on. And of course, he's got all the spreadsheets and everything going on there. So now that I had this opportunity, I asked him, like, bro, what's going on here? Can you explain it to me? And of course, he was very kind to. So here is the explanation of how you compare general marches to see which one is better. Maybe that could help you out while you're making selections for generals. Check it out.
So the first thing we're going to talk about is the effective attack, and you had some questions about that. So what are your questions about effective attack?
Okay. One of the main things that I've always wondered about Ebony is the difference between buffs and march size. Okay, how it works, and you know it's one of the big sort of arguments that we have in Ebony is like when you have the option of getting extra buffs or getting extra march size, which do you take? And at which point is there a threshold that at which point taking one is better than the other? And I've seen the stuff that you had on the effective attack calculation, and I wanted to know, like, okay, what are the basic assumptions for that and how it works, and just getting a sense of, how to actually use it and put it in practice.
Okay, those are good questions. So I've written out on a Word doc basically how the formula is calculated. I did it this way because it's a very long formula, and when you look at it through Excel formulas, it's very convoluted and complicated. So hopefully this will simplify it to terms that's very easy to understand.
Okay.
So the first thing we're looking at is the effective attack formula right here.
Mhm.
Now at the
Okay.
very basic level, all this is your total march size times your attack. So if, for example, you have 10 troops with 10 attack, you do 10 times 10, you get 100. That's their total effective attack. And
Okay.
that's just the very basic bare bones. Going a little bit more in depth with that, we have the base attack formula, which in my spreadsheets, this is like the one that we compare it to. This
Mhm.
formula is calculated with the march size base. So if you go into your rally spot, you'll see on details, you can look at the level of it, and it'll tell you what
Yeah.
the default march size for that is. That's the
Yeah.
base march size, and that's what the percentages are calculated off of. So you take that, and then you take the march size increase. That's going to be the number in green on your rally
Yeah.
spot, and you add
Hmm.
those two together.
Hmm.
And then we'll do the same thing for the attack base. So what you'll do for that, this number is a little bit harder to get because you'll have to go into when you go into your stables to look at it, it only shows the green
Yeah.
number, which is your attack base
Hmm.
plus your attack increase. It doesn't actually
Hmm.
tell you the base attack. So to get the base attack, you have to use a third-party website. It's called Evony Wiki, and they have a spreadsheet on there that'll tell you the base attack for all of the troops. And as best as I
Hmm.
can tell, it is accurate, so that's where we get that number from. To determine the attack increase, we have to take the green number that you see in your stables and then
Hmm.
subtract the base from it. And then that separates the base from the attack increase from all the buffs you get from like your research, uh, your whatever else that buffs it, other than the generals or things that you assign to the march.
Mm.
And then once you have these two numbers, you multiply them together, and this is your basic attack. So this attack right here is basically what your default attack would be if you sent out a march without a general attached. And that's pretty much it. So this is the one we compare the attack with the general to. Does all that make sense so far?
Yeah, yeah, it does. Yeah, it does. The underlying assumption for this, which I assume is is what you're going with, is that the attack of the march is just basically dependent on the troops that are in there and their attack stats. So there's no added complication to it. It's just troops and attack.
Yeah, pretty much. It's
Okay.
just the troop stats, whatever buffs you have from your keep, like your duty officers if you have any research, the buffs that are going to remain consistent no matter what general you put on the march. So it's those buffs because those
Okay.
ones aren't going to change and they're not relevant to the general discussion because they're separate from it. So with the next step in the process is to calculate the attack with the general. So this is basically the same as the basic attack formula, except we are
Hmm.
going to add in the calculation to calculate how much the general is going to add to that march.
Hmm.
So the same as before, march size base plus march size increase plus the march size of the general, and then we multiply that times the attack base, the attack increase, and the attack that the general gives us. And again, this one is pretty simple. It's just a step up from the base attack formula. But what
Yeah.
we're concerned about is how do we find out what the attack for the general is and what march size is the general going to give us. And that's these two formulas right here. The first one is the march size formula. You're going to take the march size from the general. So let's say that you throw on a general that has 10% march size. You
Hmm.
put 10 in here and divide it by 100.
Hmm.
That is to convert that number to a decimal. That's going to give you zero point
Hmm.
0.1. So then you'll multiply that zero point 0.1 times the base march size. And that's going to give
Hmm.
you a portion of the march size base. It's going to equal out to 10% of it,
Hmm.
which we then plug it back in here and add it to these other two numbers. And the thing is, the calculation is the same for the attack. You take the attack percent from the general, divide it by 100, multiply it by the base attack of the troop that they're buffing. And then we plug it into
Hmm.
this formula, and that's it. That's essentially
Okay.
how it is calculated. But the last step is the one that I have in most of my spreadsheets, and it's the one that we compare. This is the effective attack increase. Because when we're comparing generals, we want to see how much we are going to buff that march and compare it to other
Okay.
generals to see how much they buff that march. What
Mm.
we're going to do there is take the effective attack with general formula, which is this one, and
Hmm.
then we are going to subtract the basic attack formula. So that's going to give us the number for what the actual general we assigned has buffed that march. And
Hmm.
for these calculations, you can also calculate it for an assistant general as well, or with dragons. All you have to do is factor in those stats into this part with the march size from general and attack from general, since they do add together. And if you calculate them separately, they're not going to multiply together, so it's not an accurate number. You have to do them as one.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It does. I know you've mentioned it in your videos a few times, but I think that this is you need to take it at one troop tier at a time,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah, because whenever
Hmm.
you change the tier of troops, it does impact the base value.
Okay.
You want to see
Okay.
an example of it in action?
Yeah, sure. Let's see you in the spreadsheet show like what values it gives when you're looking at a particular troop type.
Let's take a look at the mounted troops. So, and this is really where we're going to be looking at the march size. Let's take, for example, Hannibal and Roland. If we sort by attack, we see Hannibal does have higher attack than Roland, 277 and 295. The march size, however, is their biggest difference. We got 0 and 16.
Hmm.
Now, this is the formula, which is why I say it doesn't really make a lot of sense. But this is the exact formula that I just explained, just with referencing all these different boxes in here.
Hmm.
This one right here is the base attack for whatever march we want to calculate. Let me bring up the base troop stats, and we'll put in the stats. Let's actually, let's put in a march that you would use, Akka, and let's compare Roland versus Hannibal for you. What tier mounted troops do you normally use?
Let's go with T14.
Okay.
Let's have a look at T14, assuming a sort of like a PvE march.
Do you know what your buff percent is actually? What I'm gonna have
Um,
you do is go into your stables.
mhm.
Tell me the green number that appears when you read the mounted troops tier 14.
And the number that I have there for attack is 22878.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we're gonna take that number, subtract the base, which is 6670, and then we will put it in this box. It gives us 1608. What base level is your rally spot?
My rally spot is level 39. Right. So the base march size is 500,000.
So we got 500,000, and then what's the green number on your rally spot?
The green number is 1908250.
So now this calculator is now calibrated for your specific march. It looks like
Mhm.
Napoleon Prime would be the best for you. Washington Prime would also be good.
Mhm.
Andre Martinus does come above Roland, which since it is not a fully like developed march, we are going to see a little bit when your rally spot is lower level. There's less base to give you that percentage buff from, so it does
Mhm.
mean that the march size is less important, and that's why I say it really does depend on your specific situation. So at the moment, Martinus would give you more damage than Roland would. Roland would give you an extra 38 billion, and Martinus would give you an extra 42 billion. But
Okay.
as you develop further, higher buffs, higher base rally spot, you're going to see Roland climb up in that, and he will start to
Mhm.
perform better than Martinus will.
Okay.
So they're
Mhm.
very close. You probably wouldn't notice much of a difference. If you were going to win a battle, you would probably win it anyways. The only difference
Mhm.
you might see is in the number of casualties. There might be a slight difference.
Mhm.
Hannibal is actually right behind Roland by a little bit, so
Mhm.
it's not that wide of a gap between the two.
Yeah.
So at your current stage, uh, I'd say Hannibal is probably a fine choice, but as you develop further, you would want to focus away from Hannibal and start to develop
Mhm.
Roland. But I wouldn't
Mhm.
say it's something that's super time sensitive at the moment. So that's
Mhm.
basically how the attack rolls. Do you have any questions about that particular calculation?
No, I mean, I think it's very very clear to me now. Yeah, I follow like the steps that you took. I follow the assumptions that you've made on it, and I think it's clear. It's clear to me. So that's fine.
Now, you were talking about earlier about you were trying to decide which assistant between Washington Prime and I believe Hestia, was it?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Do you want to run the numbers for those ones versus a March with Hannibal?
Okay. All right. That's fine. Maybe we can maybe we have a cup of coffee later and we go through it. Don't want to bore everyone with the numbers because I think we could talk about this for a very long time.
Yeah, definitely we could.
Yeah.
And you know the funny thing about it? We did still talk about it for a very long time. We went on for a while. After this, we talked about how HP and defense affects the general choices. And he even asked me to go through how I pick my generals, what generals I'm using, what was the selection process, and things like that. And we actually talked for a bit. So, if you're wondering, okay, Aka, what kind of stuff did you talk about your generals and things like that? Well, you're in luck because this is the video right here. In the video, I go in depth about how I select my generals and the kind of things that I went through while picking the different generals I have. Maybe that might also help you out with your general selection issues. Alright guys, big thanks to Evony Academy. Thank you guys very much. Aka signing out.